Welcome to DocPoint Helsinki International Documentary Film Festival. My name is Peter-Jan van Damme, and I will moderate this Q&A with Loup Bureau, the director of Trenches, which is in the DocPoint-elokuvatapahtumat competition for Best International Documentary. Welcome, Lou. How are you doing?
Thank you. Welcome. First of all, I wanted to say that it's a real honor for me to be in this selection and to be at the DocPoint Film Festival. So thank you for that.
It's good to have you here. I rewatched the film just now, literally a couple of minutes ago. It's today we're recording this on the 17th of January. Obviously, there is a lot going on at the moment, and by the time the film is screening, hopefully things are sort of the same or better. But of course, it's something we could talk about. I want to ask first, maybe just out of curiosity, how did you get into this? Like, where did you get the idea from? And then how does one start to approach this topic, also from a productional side?
Well, I started to interest myself about Ukraine at the revolution of Maidan in 2014. So it was a really interesting times because the country was evolving a lot in all terms in kind of society. And after that, the war happened very quickly, just after the revolution. And I started actually to follow people I knew from the revolution, people I met on the Maidan place. I started to follow them on the war, because a lot of young people actually engaged themselves in the front lines as volunteers, to be soldiers or to help like volunteers. And some of them actually became some of my friends. And so it was easy for me to follow them and trying to understand what's happening in the front lines. And then a lot of time passed, because now the war is almost 8 years, and a lot of things have changed. And actually 3 or 4 years ago, I went to some positions with commanders I knew from before, and I really understood that the war were evolving in a trenches war, which was not the case at the very beginning of the war. And it was very interesting, because for me, as a Westerner, as an European, the trenches has a very strong signification. We all have, in France at least, we all have references from what it's like a trenchy. We all have images from our book history from the First World War. And so it struck me a lot to see this in the 21st century, and I understood that it was interesting to imagine this environment as with an artistic approach to understand what it's like to live in a trenchy in the 21st century.
Yeah, I had the same idea. That I'm originally Flemish, so I have that same trenches. When I saw the film the first time, I was thinking, okay, this is something I recognize from World War I. But yeah. I had no idea this is going on again 100 years later.
And that's interesting, because the Ukrainians, they don't have at all the same references. For example, I remember I talked to one documentary filmmaker in Ukraine, and he told me he saw the film, and he told me I never thought about the trenches like this, because for them it's just a strategical approach of making a war. Like, it makes sense because they are stuck in the front lines and they have to protect themselves. So of course the trenches is the better way to do it. But they didn't imagine this environment as somewhere where you could actually understand the war in a bigger approach and understand what it's like to live in this kind of environment.
Is that why the film is mostly in black and white?
Yeah, actually, it was very interesting for me to try to create a special limbo, to make the viewer not understand at the very first moment where it was. It could be in another time. We don't know exactly where we were. I mean, we know where we are because there is a text, but it's I think it's interesting for the viewer not to understand clearly what the environment is, and maybe it reminds me and him maybe something different from what he knew from before. So that's why the black and white is very interesting, because it looks like an old movie, of course, and also because I think in this very close environment, very little environment, the lights and the characters are more like highlights in this black and white environment that if it was in color, because there isn't that much colors in the trenches. That's something very special. Like it's all gray. It's like 50 shadows of grays, and so I mean the black and white was making more sense for me.
Yeah, yeah, I think it works really well, and also the transition to the color image. That's something I was wondering. I mean, the film is not entirely clear, but I think one of your main characters, I think it was Grisha, he returns to the front line. Is that like what actually happened? Does he go back? What happens to most of these soldiers after they? I mean, they call it a vacation, but it seems like some of them are not planning to go back, but eventually they do. How does that work mostly?
Well, it depends of the soldiers, but some of them have contracts, like limited contracts. For usually it's for 2 years, so they engage themselves for 2 years in the army. But some of them are here in the army since the very beginning of the war, so since 8 years. So they have huge psychological issues, because it's really traumatizing to stay that long in the trenches. And when they stay in the trenches, they have only 2 weeks vacation somehow for a year. So like they are staying 6 months, then 2 weeks vacation, and then another 6 months. So they are like staying really like all the time in this environment. And the thing is that in Ukraine, a lot of young soldiers, a lot of young people engage themselves in the war, because it's actually now a really good paid, like to be a soldier in Ukraine, because at the very beginning of the war, they didn't have that much soldiers. They were overwhelmed by what happened, and they decided to like make a lot of information, like I will not say propaganda, because like that. I mean, military is always kind of propaganda, but anyway, like they decided to make young people interested in this thing of being a soldier. So now they are well paid for Ukraine. They are paid 600 euros a month, and the average salary in Ukraine is 300 euros. So some of them, they are not even here like for political reasons. They are here because it's the best way to earn their lives. But of course, mostly they share the political reasons, but it's not the first thing why they're here. And so the Ukrainian army is about 150,000 soldiers, which is like really a huge number, like more than any Western country actually, except Russia. So the issue of all the post-traumatized psychological impact of the soldiers is really inherent, is really present in the Ukrainian society, and a lot of young people, when they are coming back from these front lines, they are completely lost. And I wanted to show that in the film. I wanted to show that it's not because you are going out of the trenches that the war is finished. Like most of the soldiers, they begin to have like huge issues when they are coming back to the civil society, but the Ukrainian government doesn't help them like out of the front lines, because we know that they don't have enough of funds and that they cannot do that. They already have to focus on the war effort.
You mentioned nowadays the army is much bigger. Maybe it's more prepared as well. In the film as well, there's a couple of references to NATO. What is your take on today's situation
on the front lines?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that it's basically the same. It always stays the same since a few years at least. But there's still that's the thing, you know. We always talk about the war as a frozen war, because there isn't movements of troops in terms of displacing the front lines. But there is everyday fightings, and some of them finished by have casualties and sometimes dead also, dead soldiers. But it's something actually which is very interesting because the war is happening in a very large perimeter. The front line is about 300 kilometers, so it's huge. But in the same time, there isn't that much casualties because all sides are very well protected. They are in these trenches, in these bunkers, so it's very hard, like, for them to strike another part or another part. But the thing is that they are not using actually all the means, all the military means that they could use. Because, for example, the Ukrainian government, they have like new weapons, new military stuff from Western countries, but they are not using it because they know that it will be a red line for Russia. And we are talking about it like right now in the news because it's all about what they are allowed to do and not to do on the front lines.
Yeah, like they mentioned also in the film, I think that where they say there is a ceasefire, so you could be criminally charged if you actually attack first.
Yeah. That's something very interesting because according to the Minsk agreement, like the agreements that were made between the two sides under Moscow rules, and also the Westerners, they are supposed not to fight. I mean, the Ukrainians, they just have the right to respond to the fires. But the thing is that it's happening all the time, so they are always answering something. And also, like, it depends of the places. I've been to places where Ukrainians never attack at first, but I know that in some places they don't like respect it. So it depends where you are.
Yeah, of course. Last thing I read about the situation today is that Russia might be, of course, who knows what the truth is in this, but Russia might be planning to provoke some kind of action that would allow them then to invade. Would this be something like what you're referring to? How do you see something like this could happen?
Yeah, actually, at the beginning of the war in 2014, a lot of events like this happened. And for example, there were fake bombings. You know, like there were like crazy propaganda from each side, and they were always putting the responsibility of what happened on the other side. And sometimes it was crazy because we understood that some events were created for like just making a response from the other side. So there is really, it's like an information war all the time. So you never know exactly what's happening because something which is like apparently clear could actually be very different from what you understood in the press. So you always have to be like take a side, you know, take a back side to understand. And sometimes you never know because, for example, like at the last Friday, there were a cyber attack on the Ukrainian websites from the government, and actually they are now saying that it could be a very more strong thing that they previously said. It could be like something that could destroy the Ukrainian infrastructure from the inside. I mean, the websites. So there's always a difference between what you saw, what you understand in the press, and what is the reality. And so that's very difficult that's why it's very difficult now to say that it's going to be a close invasion in the next few days or next few weeks. You cannot know. It's impossible to know. It can happen like today. It can happen today. It can happen in 6 months, and it can never happen. You will never know.
Yeah. Well, let's hope for the best. In terms of filmmaking, what kind of a person does it take? I read you've been in prison in Turkey for quite some time. You're spending this, I don't know how many years you spend on this film, but not every filmmaker goes to war to make a film. How do you see, how do you deal with it? How do you cope with it? You ask also the soldiers, how would your parents react if you would die here? How is this for you? I mean, it's not easy, I presume, but do you feel like you got used to it, or how do you deal with it?
Well, it's all about which risk you're willing to take to say something or to show something. and I think like every filmmaker has his own limits. And I've been covering what's happened in Ukraine since a very long time, and I have now very close friends from this country, and so it touched me a lot what's happening there, and I wanted to try to make people understand like we should more focus about what's happening in Ukraine, because it's not only a question of geopolitical aspect, it's also like how do we treat like another country which is very close from Europe. And I feel like as I strongly feel like an European citizen, and I strongly feel that we have to be interested in what's happening in other countries in Europe. I mean, in terms of the not the European Union, but like the more like bigger geographical aspect. And actually, for me, what was the harder part for during the shooting was to stay focused on what I had in mind, because when you are only sleeping for 2 or 3 hours per day, because there is always fighting during the night also, it's very easy to letting go, you know, like to forget what you are, why you're here, and what you want to do, and you have to stay focused about the artistic approach you put in your mind before, and you have to stay focused about what you want to show. And there is also moments where fightings happen very strongly, where moments which were very dangerous, and I could have actually left the front lines a few times, because I wasn't like I wasn't like very happy to be in this kind of environment for months. Because the thing is that usually the journalists or even the filmmakers, they don't have the authorization to stay that long. You know, they only have to stay for a few days. They need to have a press officer behind them. They're not allowed to film or to shoot everything. And in my case, I was totally free, because one of the commander of the unit I was with, I knew him, so he let me go inside and stay with the soldiers and sleep in the bunkers. So I was like really inside the trenches. I think that makes the thing really interesting and very different from what we saw, because it never happened. Even Ukrainians documentary filmmakers, they are not allowed to stay that long. And the top official commanders from the Ukrainian army, they don't know about the film. I mean, they know now. Someone like they saw that there were a film about the trenches, but they didn't know during the time I was in the trenches. So it even could have stopped at the one moment without any like warning. You know, like someone could have called the commander of the unit and say, "Okay, we heard that there is a French filmmaker in the trenches, and you have to get out." So you never know, like if you will be able to finish the film. You never know if you will be like if you will stay alive. It's a lot of unknown. It's a lot of unknown. Yeah.
And definitely, if you were Russian, you couldn't have made this film.
Yeah.
But you were alone, right? You were
I was alone.
Recording sound, everything.
Yeah, I was alone. I knew a soldier who could translate for me, so he helped me because I cannot speak like fluently Russian or Ukrainian. I understand some words, but not enough to have like a direct conversation. But mostly I was seeing myself like somehow like invisible. I was staying with the soldiers, but I stayed for so long that at one moment they just forgot that I was here, and they could like speak fluently and normally about their daily lives, and that was the interesting part. From the moment, like a few weeks, I think it takes a few weeks at least. You know, like you have to come back and. A lot of times, but from one moment they just stop to be interested in what you are doing, and that's the interesting part for you. It's like you would have a daily life.
You feel like it's because you had this approach that you're trying to be invisible, or however you'd manage that, or just that they have something more urgent going on at that point. They're being fired at. They need to deal with their own emotions and so on. So I guess.
Yeah, and the thing is that there is a huge lethargy inside the trenches, because the physical violence, the bombings and the shellings, it's not all the time. It's just a few minutes per day, I would say. and the rest of the time they are waiting. They are waiting for something, or like they are doing their daily life stuff. But at the end, they are not like walking as a soldier, like at the image we have of soldier. And so, you know, like when you are like not doing anything during the whole day except like waiting for something, and then you are like with someone, with me in the trenches, like you can speak for like 4 hours or 5 hours, but from after 2 or 3 weeks, you have nothing to say more. You know, like you said. We talked a lot, and at one moment it's like we had nothing to say more, so I could like freely shoot them and film them at this moment. You know, like when they were like not interested, not curious anymore about what I was doing there.
Yeah, I can imagine. All right, we have to round up soon. Just a quick question. Can you tell us anything about your next film? Are you already working on something?
Well, I'm working about Ukraine again.
All right.
And I'm working especially about what's happening now in Ukraine, because I think it's really interesting to understand also from the society point of view, like how it's like to be a citizen in a country that could be invaded at any moment. There is a lot of things which is happening now, and I think I will focus on these aspects. I don't know exactly how and in which way, but I will focus on this aspect in the next few months. Yeah.
All right, sounds great.
Yeah.
Please do let us know when it's finished, and hopefully we can screen it as well then.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you very much for making time and for sharing your views of the trenches with us.
Thank you. It was really nice to talk to you. Talk about Ukraine, of course.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. See you.